Yeah, I think we're going to start by giving a little bit of history, longer history than you think. Over 20 years ago was the first time I met Harry, and it just so I was trying to figure out the first time I actually met him, but I think what it was is I was in a band. It was called Attentat, and we played noise music and did some like weird performance stuff and like made little fires and things like that. And he was in a band that sang only in pirate talk. And we were like a punk band that only the lyrics were like "R matey" and like they only talked in pirates, and it was a benefit for the Zappatistas. The whole event was a benefit for Zappatistas, I think. And yeah, so that was over 20 years ago. So then what? In North Carolina, where there's like, and then we also hung out like in the backwoods where there's like weird cabins falling apart and you have to watch out for meth labs and all this kind of shit. And then 4 years ago, I was here and I hadn't seen Harry in over 10 years. We like almost crossed paths a lot of different times. We both were really busy with different stuff, but I found him here and he wasn't really he was doing some different stuff than Bitcoin, and I was more into Bitcoin.
I was just doing Mixnets, actually.
Just doing Mixnets, and he was like, yeah, I'm trying to raise money for this crazy thing. I was like, well, why don't you think about doing it with, cryptocurrency and all that? And here we are, 4 years, a lot of things have changed. A lot of things have been built in 4 years. And yeah, it's funny. Did you know that actually Winnie the Pooh is banned in China? Yeah, so you might get plus 20 social credit or minus social 20 credit, but maybe, I walked over the line, but maybe, if we had anonymous network level privacy, then you would be able to express yourself if you wanted to share a picture of a Winnie the Pooh or another meme. Then you could without fear of the state giving you a bad credit score. And the same thing goes for when you want to send a cryptocurrency transaction like these guys. Well, damn, I don't know if I'm going to read the whole thing, but basically he says that don't you know internet traffic is observable by global passive adversaries like the Chinese government or the NSA. I use Grin, Tor, and Signal, or you use Monero, or use Bitcoin, Tor, and Signal. On-chain metadata can be harvested and exploited. But I use Signal. Traffic analysis of Signal can reveal who is talking to who, when, and where. So part of the cypherpunk trifecta is peer-to-peer uncensorable money, anonymous networking, and anonymous credentials. So we have arguably peer-to-peer uncensorable money. We've done that pretty good. And so now we need to work on some other things to bring us to the next level. And here you go, Harry.
So obviously, thanks for Theo and me go back 20 years, and I was actually here, I think 2017 or 16. I actually came not because I just saw that, the assassination market guy was speaking. I was like, oh man, like David Bell, he's a legend. I got to see him. And I got here, and it was a really cool atmosphere. And I met Theo, who encouraged me to quit my job as a pointless academic, working on Mixnets and trying to make shit a bit more real. And I even met Adam Back here, and Adam Back was like, yeah, Mixnets. I tried to sell those in the 90s and zero-knowledge systems, and it failed. You should try again. So all the encouragement here is what led to a large extent the NIM. So I'm very honored to be speaking here to present the fact that we presented this like crazy idea in a lightning talk in 2017. Last year we presented like the plan, and this year we're presenting the first stage of the code, the delivery of the plan, and the fact that you can even use it right now. So yeah, we didn't think that was never been done before. This is the first running Mixnet since that's live, that's decentralized, different peers running the mixes. We have over 350 nodes mixing traffic. And this is the biggest thing. I was showing it to my old friend George Denises, who unfortunately now works at Libra. But he did this thing called Mixmaster back in the day, the cypherpunk remailers. And he was like, holy shit, this is the biggest fucking Mixnet we've ever had. And it's still quite small, but we're just saying it's starting to grow, and by next year, we plan to be, take over the world. So the issue is the internet inherently does not have any level of privacy. You send a TCP/IP packet, you do the whole SYN-ACK dance, your IP address is leaking. And a lot of people are like, yo, I'll use Signal or Zcash, and it's not just the IP address. Tor actually does a pretty good job at just hiding your IP address, but Tor leaks the volume and the timing of the information. And you have to recreate these circuits typically every 10 minutes or so, or if you recreate the circuits every transaction, you kind of stand out from the rest of the Tor network. And so you do not have like a large amount of anonymity against an enemy, which is observing like the NSA, both ends of the network. And VPNs are mostly bullshit because you're just moving your root of trust from your laptop, which you might actually want to trust, to some guy like, I don't know, NordVPN or whatnot, who is probably just going to backdoor your ass and hand all your data to whoever wants it. So what we said is that even with high-tech tech like Signal or Zcash, they're all leaking this meta data all over the place. So we wanted to fix that. And we began fixing it actually by doing interviews with users. Actual people who were, and we actually did this large-scale 100-person study of can people use shielded Zcash? And the answer is no, not at all. Actually, about 1/4 could successfully purchase using something, I won't say what they were purchasing. Actually, they were purchasing anonymous VPSs and domain names from the Jala. And we actually gave them the money at each step to like go to the next step. And the fact of the matter is, running Tor, trying to get a VPN working, getting confused over shielded versus transparent transactions. It was a fucking catastrophe, to be honest. And so we said, well, this is something that should be fixed. And while we were doing these experiments, the Corona happened. And I think Corona really brought out the political stakes of what we're doing. So essentially, the problem with Corona is that it has forced the digital totalitization of our lives very quickly. That even the parts of our lives, such as education or government services or health services, which were most resistant to digitization, have now fallen under the name of public health. Our social lives have been incredibly restricted. I think tomorrow this conference would be illegal because you can't have more than 10 people in the same place. Exactly. And this is all done in the name of our own public health, not which somehow is supposed to supersede politics. And this has happened before. The way I view this space is that during the fall of the Roman Empire, when we also had many plagues, like the Antonine Plague and whatnot, a friend of mine, Agamben, who's quite critical of the Corona stuff, I don't agree with him on everything, but he made a good point. He said, the people that fled the existing society during the fall of the Roman Empire and the years of plague fled to monasteries, but they weren't like the freaks. They weren't the people, people called them freaks, but they were actually the best people that the empire had produced, the most intelligent, the most thoughtful, the most talented, and that is fled to monasteries to escape. And that's, I think, what's happening today, that we are fleeing this total catastrophe of a world order which is dying before our eyes. And there's a lot of people trying to blame things on Russia, as if history did not exist before Putin. They're saying, oh, Trump, WikiLeaks helped elect Trump, fake news is manipulating people, we're all essentially becoming tools of some sort of apparatus. And I actually think this is not true in a large sense, that humans do ultimately have an instinct for freedom, an instinct to express themselves. And what we need to provide is we need to provide tools to make that possible. And the exact same tools which people are using to, quote unquote, stop fake news is essentially an architecture of, and also for our own health because of Corona, is an architecture of surveillance and control and censorship. There is no ultimate difference between content moderation with, quote unquote, community guidelines made by, a bunch of random feel-good woke liberals that work at Google, and censorship. by the Chinese government. Same architecture. And we will expect that this architecture, surveillance, and censorship will be weaponized more and more and more. And even from the left, last week, Chomsky got blocked from live streaming on YouTube. No, Facebook, sorry. So, I mean, it's completely crazy. And as we try to escape and exit this system, we're looking for ways to understand what is it that we're trying to protect. And my friend Alexei, who can't come here because of Corona, has been trying to comprehend what this kind of freedom we're fighting for is in some more specific level, using what he calls the right to digital integrity. So it's just kind of like, people in most constitutions, at least in Switzerland, where I currently live, have the right to physical and mental integrity, which guarantees your autonomy and your freedom. So it is illegal to, for example, put you in chains like a slave, because that prevents you from physically acting. And by preventing you from physically acting, your autonomy has been denied. And that the data protection rules don't really have like a firm basis. And what Alexei imagines that there should be a right to digital integrity, which guarantees our autonomy in the digital space. And after the Snowden revelations, in a, I would say, more vague sense, Snowden himself tried to articulate this thing that we needed a sort of, with Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the web, we needed some sort of Magna Carta, some way to enforce our rights, our autonomy on the internet in face of mass surveillance and attempts to control us. But these politically all failed. And what Snowden said, which is correct, and the only thing when you have general nation-state failure that works is cryptographic tools. Cryptography can bind even nation-state level adversaries and guarantee freedom in a way that mere legislation never can. And I don't want to go too deep into that, but I do think that we are slowly seeing progress. Alexei's been working in various Swiss cantons, I think in Valais, which is where a lot of people go skiing. He recently passed this right to digital integrity in the Constitution. And so we're trying to hope in the long run to make Switzerland, or at least Roman Switzerland, a kind of island of digital autonomy and integrity within what we believe is the collapse of the new Roman Empire. So feel free to come to Neuchâtel and join us in our new cypherpunk monastery. We're not as impressive as Prague, but we're going to work on it. And there's real demand for privacy from people. People want these kinds of cryptographic tools, but there's fundamental problems in how they work. Tor had a huge spike of growth after the Snowden revelations, but then fell back down. It's been maintaining a constant 6,000 nodes ever since, and streaming about the same level of traffic. Signal almost shut down, but when Trump got elected, Moxie was like, I'm going to keep it running. And it's having huge growth, but it had a huge problem with funding. Brian Acton, the co-founder of WhatsApp, gave Moxie like $50 million, and so now it's still going. But there's still not a good way we need to figure out how to get these projects going. And that's what happened to myself. When I came to this conference a few years ago, it occurred to me that Bitcoin is the key to making this all work. Because this gives us the financial sovereignty and the new forms of capital formation, which are essentially a precondition for building any kinds of new tools. And any kinds of new tools will be necessary to survive the coming, to be honest, probably genocides and all sorts of terrible things will happen as this empire collapses. Even Julian Assange noted this. I was on HPCC TV yesterday, when he noticed that the most of the quote-unquote internet freedom community, people working on anti-censorship technologies, have been taken over by US funding, he asked, where did all the free people go? What happened to the cypherpunks? And I think they came here. They all came to Bitcoin. They came to cryptocurrency. And so what we're trying to do with this project is we're trying to basically build a new kind of project which complements Bitcoin, but adds the anonymous communication channel that was hypothesized by the original cypherpunks and anonymous credentials, and makes it financially sustainable to run this infrastructure. So the first component is a Mixnet. I've already described it last year, but I'll give it a quick overview. A Mixnet has multiple hops, like Tor, but it adds a few new components. First, it obfuscates the timing of your traffic by mixing them like a deck of cards. Second, it adds cover traffic. So there's not enough traffic on the network, you add fake traffic, which helps you become more anonymous. And unlike blockchains, where there's sort of a competition for limited blockchain space, Mixnets scale like the web. You simply add more mix nodes, you add more capacity. And so it has a horizontal scalability. And in fact, the more people that use a Mixnet, the more scalable it is, because you're always anonymous inside a crowd, and as that crowd gets bigger, you can do less and less mixing and less cover traffic to get the same level of anonymity. So the comparison, just to be brief, you can see a VPN is just moving your root of trust. Tor is better than the VPN, inarguably so. You have 3 hops, so at least one node can't correlate all your traffic. But an enemy that can watch both the entry and exit nodes can do traffic correlation attacks. So NIM prevents that by, again, adding fake cover traffic, adding obfuscation of timing, and essentially works sort of like this. You have a user agent. All your TCP/IP packets go to a local client. This local client is a SOCKS 5, at least in our current setup, could be HTTP, as proxy, 127.0.0.1 on port, we use 1789. It goes to that port, it takes all of the traffic, converts to what's called Sphinx packet format, which is the same packet format used by Lightning, which is a kind of constant size, re-randomizable packet, so the packets themselves all look alike and are unlinkable. Sends the packets through a Mixnet. Those Mixnets changes the timing to make it more anonymous, and if you have too much traffic, you can add more nodes to the network, and then the packets are anonymized without revealing metadata. And so what we've done over the last year is we actually built the damn thing. You can go to nimtech.net/docs. You can install a mix node to start mixing traffic. It's still testing, so we do upgrades. If you can't figure out how to install it, we have a Telegram chat set up by Hans Brick, who is part of this group, who is a wonderful human being. Unfortunately has Corona right now, but hopefully is watching from afar. And he's been invaluable in helping set up hundreds of nodes. And all of our code is open source. You can change it, you can download it, you can tell us you find bugs, you can do pull requests. We'd love more of that. And then what we got working is we got Bitcoin over NIM working. Because anytime you have any kind of Bitcoin client that's using SOCKS 5, you can take that client out, put the NIM client on, and then reroute your traffic into the NIM client. So this is easy to do in Electrum, and we have it working with Blockstream Green. So if you want confidential transactions over Liquid, that works. And if you're particularly crazy, although we don't recommend people do this, you can even run Firefox, and folks have even managed to stream video over NIM. So I'm not sure I really recommend people do that right now. So we do have that working. And we have dashboard.nimtech.net has over, currently I think 400, 350, something like that, nodes all over the world running, mixing packets. This is pretty amazing stuff. And then people, they really, when we were running it just as a pure volunteer thing, we had 20, 30 nodes. And then we said, we need to basically, we had people running NIM nodes in Ghana and Africa, some guy from Minsk and Belarus, and they needed help financially. So we said, we're going to pay them in Bitcoin, and then that covers their cost. But people often, they wanted some sort of reputation score. And reputation scores in Mixnets are a really old problem. It's what Adam Back used to work on before Blockstream. And so we said, well, we should give them some sort of token. And because it's a testnet, we call it NIMF, not NIM. And we use Liquid, which is controversial, but I think the right choice at the time. And it's still the right choice. And we put these sort of reputation scores as a sort of token on Liquid, and you can see at a glance in your wallet how long your mix node's been up. And then at the end of the month, based on how long you've been up and many other things, currently actually we send out Bitcoin to reward you. And in the future, We're going to work on ways of pledging nymph and using nymph to basically make mixed nodes more reliable. So if you go down, you get punished. If you're up, you get rewarded. Currently, we don't punish anyone. We just give you nymph tokens and Bitcoin. And I would like to actually thank Adam back in Blockstream. Despite the fact that there are many conspiracy theories around Blockstream, Adam, we talked to many different groups. We haven't figured out how to talk to Monero people yet. So if there's any Monero people in the audience who really want to talk, we're trying to understand the code base and how to integrate against Monero. But like, Zcash was a mess. And Blockstream really provided, I think, excellent support for NIM and has been completely on our side and completely trying to help privacy. And then in the future, what we're going to do is we are going to, currently we kind of pay for your services, your computing services, the Mixnode at a kind of flat rate. What we eventually want to do is make this more sustainable. And the way to make this more sustainable is an algorithm, kind of a proof of mixing algorithm, which can determine how much Bitcoin you should be rewarded with based on how much you're mixing. And this could be a whole talk by itself. I'll give you the very brief version, which is essentially the nice thing about anonymous packets is you don't know who sent it. So the system itself can generate, just as we generate a Tor, kind of pool of shared randomness. That randomness can be used to seed what's called a verifiable random function. That variable random function can then be used to randomly and fairly sample paths through a mixed network, like hop 1 in layer 1, hop node, let's say, node X in layer 2, and node Z in layer 3. And then you can essentially keep running that process over and over again and statistically sample the health of the network and reward people proportionately, and that you cannot distinguish the reward traffic we use from other traffic. And the big trick, which I'll just mention very briefly, is that when you send messages over Lightning or NIM, we use the same packet format. It's called Sphinx, and there's a nonce, which exists for replay attack protection. And you can just write that nonce in a Merkle tree at the end of each time period, maybe every few hours, maybe every few minutes. We'll figure that out empirically over the testnet's existence. We reveal what the reward traffic is, and then you can prove, because that reward traffic has a nonce per hop, you can prove that you saw that traffic, and you can say, I delivered it, and that guy can either prove or prove not that he did get that packet. And we can preserve unlinkability while basically preserve the kind of integrity of the whole system while fairly rewarding the traffic. And that's much better, this is again a whole nother talk, than paying by hop, which is done by like scammy Ethereum projects like Hopper or even Lightning, because there's lots of attacks on paying by hop. I can, for example, send stuff to just my friends or drop packets, and we're trying to prevent this by taking advantage of the anonymous nature of packets inside NIM and then using that to basically have a fair proof of mixing algorithm. That's what we're currently working on. And so what we do is, in order to basically, we need to somehow take, obviously it's a testnet, we're like paying for everything from our own Bitcoin because we're wonderful people and we really want to see the network grow. But eventually the network itself has to be sustainable. And we know how that works. In theory, and perhaps hopefully one day in practice, Bitcoin will be sustainable because there's a transaction fee taken, and that transaction fee pays the network. And this is probably what we should do as well. And you could imagine, I would like to know people's opinion on this, if I'm sending a Bitcoin transaction or something else, Monero, whatever, and I want to be more private, how much cents, what low amount would you pay for a kind of privacy transaction fee? And then the problem with privacy transaction fees is you don't want to dox yourself by paying the fee. You don't want to dox the mixed nodes. You don't want to de-anonymize people. So the technology that is not quite built, but will be built very soon, and we hope to have a big surprise for everyone on November 5th, is anonymous credential technology, based on what's called the coconut signature scheme, which will basically allow us to anonymously taking a non-anonymous cryptocurrency, and this is relatively close to, I think, some of the stuff that Frank and Smuggler are working on with Opaque Link. I need to look into the details, but essentially take a non-anonymous cryptocurrency, turn it into a way to pay people kind of micro payments anonymously without doxing themselves and adding even additional data. I mean, I absolutely am not a huge fan of centralized exchanges, but if you don't, people do use them. I don't personally, but we know people do, and they now have all these horrible KYC, these crazy AML rules. And so we're trying to build it so the anonymous credentials can also let you privately verify yourself and do whatever other weird stuff you have to do without doxing yourself or revealing it to the whole network. And this is a decentralized scheme, and that's the big breakthrough we've had, is that we've taken essentially some sort of charming anonymous credential scheme and we've made it work on threshold signatures. And so the crypto economics, or economics, we could say, is, in brief, users would like to use the Mixnet. They would like to access services privately, and they will pay a transaction fee, possibly. We'll discuss that in 1 second. Validators say, oh, you paid a transaction fee. How great. And then they hand that user an anonymous credential that proves that they've paid a transaction fee. The user walks up to the Mixed network, is like, hey, I paid the transaction fee. And they're like, great. Based on that transaction fee, we give you access to the network or not. If there's too much demand, then maybe you don't get in. If there's not enough, you just get in. It's just like, copying Bitcoin effectively. And then the mixed nodes then get rewarded based on those transaction fees, based on the amount of mixing they've done via this proof of mixing algorithm I outlined very briefly. And then users can access service providers, which are not hidden services really, but there's a kind of other end of the app that's using them. And then they're happy. They can use this network to have people access their service privately. And if the service provider, I don't want to be charged per message to use Signal or something nonsensical like that. So what you can imagine, apps like Signal could hook into NIM by just kind of paying these transaction fees in bulk for their users ahead of time, and then handing out these credentials to their users when they install software. So it would be transparent, it would look free, but we would be charging Moxie some hopefully relatively not so unbearable amount of funds, and the funds then goes back to pay for the mixed nodes. So that's the kind of economic background. And then what essentially the economics do is the economics balance the supply of privacy, which is provided by the mixed nodes themselves, with the demand for the users for privacy. And this demand is given by the users kind of accessing the system via these credentials and going to these apps. And then every kind of app is different. Like if I'm using cryptocurrency, I'm okay if my transaction's a bit slow. I really want it to be super private. And I can set that kind of preferred latency in the app. If I'm, on the other hand, sending a Signal message, I might want it to be a bit faster. So you can set in your client your own latency, and you can set, if you don't really know, you can say, actually, I want to be this anonymous, and we'll figure out the latency for you. We have the mathematics of that sorted via simulation, interestingly enough. And then basically, as more and more people use the network, we can calculate the entropy for the entire network, which is the anonymity provided for everyone. And over time, as the network grows, supply and demand ideally reach an equilibrium point. And of course, that equilibrium changes over time. And as that equilibrium changes over time, based on the transaction fees, the amount of traffic, and the amount of anonymity people want, mixed nodes can be subtracted if they're horrible. You put it on a Raspberry Pi, you go offline, you put it on your laptop, you close your laptop. We eventually kick you off the network. Or mixed nodes can be added as needed. And the way we add it is we sort of say, we have these transaction fees, and it would pay for your running of the node, and you could make some hefty amount of profit if you do it well. And that's the NIM system as a whole. So again, we built the first part of the system. You can use it today, although it's still very much testing, and we only provide third-party anonymity. We're not providing full sender-receiver unlinkability. That's next on our agenda, and we use that using this technology called SERBs, single use for reply blocks, which I'm not going to discuss here in detail, but essentially, I send you a message. I want to be anonymous. I want you to respond to me, Because if you send an anonymous message and you don't know if the guy got it, it's kind of useless sometimes. Who knows what happened? So you send them like a sort of Dropbox, dead drop, in the Mixnet, and they send a message back to that dead drop, and that has another dead drop, and you kind of play this dead drop game over and over and over again. And that basically gets your, you get sender and receiver unlinkability, which means you get anonymity on both sides of the equation. And then the next thing we want to do is, obviously we're talking about transaction fees. These are relatively small amounts of Bitcoin, so we need to integrate Lightning. And we're looking very hard at Lightning, particularly Anya, who works for us, trying to understand the privacy it provides, and if we can become better. NIM can be thought of almost as a slow and really anonymous kind of thing like Lightning, but we also may need Lightning itself to deliver micropayments. And of course, we want to add, and this is done for the people here, we did a survey, and most of our users really want Bitcoin. About 70% are Bitcoin maxis, but about 20% want Monero, and who are us to say? So we're going to try to integrate Monero next. And the last thing I want to say is we must support Julian Assange. And the reason is, to be honest, when we were starting this project, we had encouragement from people here. But one of the people, and I visited him in the embassy, and who was, I think, Assange wanted to see better technology because he, as someone who was actively under threat, understood that global passive adversaries, which are a very real threat, nation-state level adversaries for Assange, were monitoring his communication, and he wanted some way to fight back, and so he was actually quite supportive over both the cryptocurrency community and the use of anonymous communication technology like Mixnet. And I think he's given us quite a lot, both philosophically and practically, in terms of kind of understanding our situation and the things, and really has changed world history. And I am absolutely astonished at the level of media blackout. And I am absolutely terrified at the amount of lack of solidarity he's been shown by the world in general, despite all of the fact that he's helped in the Iraq war. And so regardless of how many people feel about Assange, the fact of the matter is, no matter how bad a person is, or how wonderful they are, it doesn't matter if you're a saint or a sinner, no one should be extradited from their home country to another country to be imprisoned forever, and you shouldn't be extradited from anywhere. And if Assange is in the UK as an Australian citizen, and he's extradited back to the US for essentially pissing off the US government under this quote-unquote Espionage Act, if this passes, then any of us could be extradited at any time, and that's incredibly dangerous. So we absolutely must see him through for this court case, and even if he does go in, we must continue, I think, the vision that himself and many other cypherpunks laid out by pursuing anonymous communication. And NIM is not the end goal. It's a small part of a puzzle. It's like a finger and a hand, but together those fingers can form a fist and hopefully bring down the existing regime. So if you're interested, that's our Telegram channel. I go in and out of attention, but I try to be there as much as possible. That's our website where you can figure out, and there's, most importantly, the docs where you can figure out how to install and run a node. And hopefully next year, we'll come back and we'll show you the whole cool Bitcoin transaction layer stuff working out even better. We'll have not just hundreds of mixed nodes, but maybe thousands. And we will have an anonymous communication layer for the 21st century. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Question there.
Okay, first of all, thank you for that. It's very interesting. I do have a couple of different questions, so I'll try to go through them pretty quickly. First of all, you mentioned Switzerland as sort of a haven. My understanding is that as of a couple months ago, Switzerland had passed some kind of law making it difficult or even illegal for Swiss crypto companies to transact with non-KYC'd or non-regulated counterparties. In other words, Switzerland is trying to create a Chinese firewall between the OK KYC'd AML'd above ground crypto universe and block off the underground non-KYC cypherpunk world. You know anything about that?
Yeah. So again, I'm not Swiss. I'm just there because I don't want to. I don't want to be in the United States right now. So
Right, understood.
as an exile, you kind of take whatever country wants you. You know, you can't be like too picky. But at the same point, I agree. Switzerland is not perfect. It's actually incredibly expensive and has conservative elements, definitely. In fact, they nearly banned immigration. I think in a vote. Almost, it was actually surprisingly close. So. The work that Alexei is Swiss, he could explain it better, but his work is to try to put privacy and digital integrity into like the constitutional framework in a decentralized way through the cantons. That does not necessarily mean that Switzerland will become a cypherpunk haven. In fact, it's mostly known as a banking haven, and as a banking haven, what's happening to all banking havens over the world right now is because of the travel rule and the FATF rules and all these forces. They're trying to basically split Bitcoin and cryptocurrency into two, into like a KYC, as you put it, KYC AML element, and a non-KYC AML element. That's kind of, it's not surprising that's happening. My understanding of the current cryptocurrency regulations in Switzerland is that it depends on the amount you're sending. So I think if it's like 5,000, but it may have been recently reduced to 2,000 or 3,000, that doesn't need to be KYC AML, but that's only on the fiat out ramps and on ramps. Now, the fact of the matter is, in the long run, I think we will have to go to, I forget the term, it's hyper-Bitcoinization. But effectively, like if they do actually use these laws, including in places like Switzerland, to actually shut down fiat on and off ramps, then we will have no choice, even if we would like to use the local country's shitcoin, to basically go with pure Bitcoin. And I think that may be the future. There's a pretty good experiment going on right now in this conference. It's working quite well. I always enjoy this conference for that reason. And I do think that the push to prevent the growth of peer-to-peer cryptocurrencies is more of a symbol of the banks freaking out about their loss of power. And I don't know if they'll be able to actually maintain that level of pressure forever. And if they do, then we just have to push harder for hyper-Bitcoinization. And Switzerland is by no means a panacea in this regard. I'm sure there are other countries that have better KYC AML rules, but I think the problem is you don't do any of them, then you basically get kicked out the banking system. In Switzerland, because their entire economy is based on the global banking system, not on Bitcoin, they're naturally trying to figure out how to comply with those rules.
I think the idea isn't so much to block off fiat on and off ramps, but to make it impossible that if you say buy Bitcoin on Coinbase, that you then can't send Bitcoin to a non-KYC exchange or non-KYC wallet.
Yeah, but then the centralized exchanges might die off, right?
Possibly.
I mean, it's seeing BISC, seeing this rise of these crazy DEXs and stuff. I do think even all the insanity happening in the DeFi space, I do think that maybe that will. That's why I said if they keep pushing so hard to fracture Bitcoin into two, then I think we have to push harder for hyper-Bitcoinization, because then Bitcoin will be impossible to use with fiat currency.
Okay, next question. You talked about funding nodes. One thing I didn't see you talk about was paying exit nodes extra, because of course the costs and hassle of running an exit node is considerably higher.
Yeah, no. Well, that's
considered?
because NIM has this really weird architecture, which I almost don't want to. So you can run an exit node. So we have this notion of what's called a service provider. So in our mind, when we were building this, we weren't thinking about web surfing. We were thinking of Signal, right? And we said, well, if you're client on Signal, you have the Signal server, and you want to be anonymous when you're touching that server. This is a very non-peer-to-peer, but is actually a useful paradigm that lots of the world follows. So we want to so the user is running Signal on their machine, and the service provider is like Moxie running a server. And so with that level, there's no exit node, right? You're just trying to hide the fact that you're using Signal for anyone watching your internet connection. Now, the other model, which is the more Tor model or VPN model, it's just an open internet proxy, right? And so that service provider is not like Moxie's server. That service provider is essentially a tunnel to the open internet and is therefore essentially a VPN or Tor exit node. And yes, on that level, it's friggin' dangerous, right? Because who knows what people will throw over that. And we do believe that there are economic models to make those sustainable. But we have not built that economics into the system, because we don't know quite how that works. But it is something that we are trying to think about. And there's nothing to prevent someone from running an Xnet node. That being said, to be very honest, open internet access is a hard problem. The entry point is also hard. So we have this notion of gateways. You can add censorship-resistant technologies, particularly like shadow socks, variant things in China, or obfuscation proxy in Europe. But we're not trying to make a pure open internet proxy. We try to customize it per app. So when we build something like Bitcoin over NIM, the service provider, it's like if you're using Blockstream, it's like the Blockstream server. It's like your full node at the other end if you're using a light wallet. And that full node then does the broadcast. So you go through the NIM Mixnet, and then that service provider does the broadcast. So on this level, we don't really have open endpoints built into the entire system, but they're an option. And we do not have a particular economic scheme to sustain open endpoints. But we do believe people will figure that out probably.
Okay, two more.
Sorry, just may I interrupt you. Are there any other questions?
They're very good questions.
How many of them are here? Just raise your hand.
These last two are going to take about 30 seconds.
Yeah, just
Okay. Very good
3-4 minutes. So
You mentioned global passive adversary.
Yeah.
That is now available commercially. There are commercial entities which now have GPA capability. It's no longer just the NSA. The other thing was you talked about.
Can you name some of the entities? Because obviously Chainalysis on Bitcoin, but what's some other entities you think have?
I'd have to look it up. These are more in the domain of internet companies that have net flow data. There's been a couple of articles on it. I don't remember the exact references. But since we're short on time, you mentioned the Assange trial. One thing we saw with the Assange trial was a lot of shadow banning by Facebook and Twitter, so that people who were covering the Assange trial were getting a lot less traffic. And this really shows the value of decentralized communications, because all of a sudden the global discourse can be controlled by Facebook and Twitter. And they can just say, okay, we don't want anybody to think about the Assange trial, so we won't let them.
I agree completely. And the horrible thing is, I think to a large extent, except in communities like this one, they have been successful. It's very difficult to discover information about the Assange trial without considerable work. And this is crazy because this trial has such huge ramifications on the very concepts of like freedom and sovereignty and how nation states relate to each other. I'm not surprised the US is pushing very hard because of Vault 7, I think in particular, to put him in jail forever. I think, and he's being prosecuted for maybe the best thing he ever did, which is the Iraq War releases, which ended the Iraq War to some extent. And he is considered a hero by many people across the world, in Tunisia and other countries where WikiLeaks did very concretely help the cause of human freedom, and I think that's undeniable. And the fact that no one is reporting on it is absolutely crazy, and it shows, 100%. We have to build the tech now, because this sort of stuff will continue. Assange will not be the last.
Thank you.
And then one more question.
sure.
That was a hard act to follow. Kudos to you for going to see Assange. I walked past the embassy a dozen times, but I was too scared to go in, so that's disappointing. A few things. What's your runway? What's your runway to launch?
Oh, well,
I mean, financially.
It's
mainly.
technically harder than it looks, right? So we think we might be able to get a mainnet out in 6 months, maybe quicker. And we're fine with that. That's not a big deal. If we don't, we'll tell you on Twitter that we need donations.
I meand more like.
But I think we can pull off, given the current team, the current system, a kind of basic mainnet. And we have good concepts, as I've just demonstrated, for solving the hard economic problems. The real question is can it really? We do need actually, what we need more than money is we need partners that are willing to run mixed nodes, but not just run mixed nodes. What we really need, you're anonymous in terms of how many other people use the system. So if someone like Signal or someone, Blockstream has been great, but if some other wallets wanted to throw in, if we can get more users in the system, that will make the system much more resilient and more anonymous for everyone. And that's what we need. And I'm actually actively looking for Monero people. I'm looking for people that can help us build apps on top of this network, because there is a minor bit of integration that has to be done. The client's pretty straightforward with SOX 5, but if you're doing something a bit more complicated on a server side, or you have a real peer-to-peer framework, then it's actually more work, and we can help that work happen. But if we launch this thing next year, and we have runway to get there, but we launch it, and there's no users, or there's not many, just a few crazy freaks, it's not going to be a great system.
So what about using Ethereum? Because I know Zook's working closely with Vitalik on Zcase Narcs and privacy.
Oh, I mean, I have a tremendous, I don't even know where to start with Ethereum. Wow, let me think about how to say this nicely. There's a reason we chose Liquid. So there's not this gas fee thing, which is completely crazy. We have had some good experiences talking with other projects, but in our experience, the Ethereum community, like we talked to them about Mixnets, and then like, some like random, 19-year-old like forks a code base we abandoned. They're like, oh, it's amazing. Like they're just not technically, they don't really understand network level privacy, and they don't seem, they're interested in privacy only as a means to make Ethereum scale using zero knowledge proof. So we've actually found much more support from the Bitcoin, to be honest, Bitcoin maximalists, than we have from the Ethereum community. And I think Ethereum is, as a whole, is going to have scalability problems, which our co-founder, Dave, predicted and made a charting solution years ago, and Ethereum ignored it, and Facebook bought it. So I think Ethereum's going to have maybe more, I don't know if the problems that Ethereum is facing are solvable, and I'm not sure if that community prioritizes privacy. So we're interested in communities which prioritize privacy and which provide solutions that work today, not 2 or 3 years down the road. And that's why we haven't dealt too much with the Ethereum community. That being said, I am very excited by Simplicity, the kind of this block Bitcoin scripting language. I'm interested in any kinds of attempts to add smart contract functionality to Bitcoin. And also, we are not Bitcoin maximalists because that's crazy if you're running an anonymity network. We pay people in Bitcoin because Bitcoin is sound money. I don't think I need to explain that to people here. I don't want to pay people something which isn't sound money. That being said, to be anonymous, you need a crowd. So we need as many different crazy blockchain people, even people you may not agree with, using this network. And that's essential to building a large-scale anonymity set. And so if there was tons of interest from Ethereum, which there isn't, right now at least, we're not going to reject them. But we have been, some people don't like it. Zcash is doing their own weird thing with Tor and Dandelion, which is not resistant to a global passive adversary. Zuko, an electric coin company, has been really friendly. The Zcash Foundation has been, I would say, exceptionally unfriendly. So we're trying to be open to everybody. That being said, we will work with the people who choose to work with us, and we will deliver code with those people first. And if other people come on later, that's okay.
Thank you very much, Harry. It was great. Thank you.